Building on your theory of change model, we're now going to dive into program design frameworks, which are used to make a more detailed program model to serve as your work plan. There are many different program design frameworks available, and their use ranges from nonprofit social services and education to government and international development. Although they vary in focus and application, they all have similar components. Remember that your theory of change is the big picture vision of how you will go from the current condition to the desired condition. Your results and strategies should reflect your mission, what you intend to do, and your vision or your image for a better world. Your theory of change is your big idea. It should be inspiring and exciting. But when it actually comes to planning the specifics, it's helpful to have a more detailed structure. That's where program design frameworks come in. Program design frameworks create a detailed action plan or program model based on your theory of change by breaking it down into more specific components. Although the structure and definition varies a little for each model, they generally include the following components. The results of your theory of change are broken down into impact and outcomes. Your theory of change strategies are divided into outputs, activities, sometimes called interventions, and resources, sometimes called inputs. Assumptions are critical to document throughout the program design process. Although they are not always included in the model itself, you should continue to add and adjust your assumptions throughout the design process. Regardless of which framework you choose, the foundation of any program model are clearly defined outcomes and impact. Your impact and outcome statements also help you know what to assess. Remember that assessment is critical to know if your program is effective, provide proof to your stakeholders that you are accomplishing your goals, and inform continued or iterative improvement of the program. Let's start by taking a look at the results side of the program model. Impact is the greater change created by the program. You could also think of impact as the sum of all of your outcomes together, plus additional time. Outcomes are your desired or expected changes that occur as a result of your program activities. They are often shown as changes over a length of time, starting during or just after the program and continuing for some time after the program. Let's focus on impact first. Impact should reflect the long-term intended change in a larger system, like your community or organization, as a result of achieving your outcomes. Your impact statement should answer the questions who, what, why, and for whom. What will be different when all of the outcomes have been reached? And how will you know that you're fulfilling your mission? Your impact should align with your mission and your theory of change results. A possible impact statement from the accelerator is, aspiring leaders take action to address sustainable development needs in their communities, supported through a network of peers, experts, and organizations committed to collective impact. One frequent point of confusion about an impact statement is, how is it different from your theory of change results? Let's take a look at the accelerator's results and impact statements. Aspiring social impact leaders take action to effectively address social challenges in their local communities. And aspiring leaders take action to address sustainable development needs in their local communities, supported through a network of peers, experts, and organizations committed to collective impact. The results statement is still big picture and conceptual. The impact statement gets more specific about the kind of social challenges being addressed and how leaders are being supported. It answers who, aspiring leaders, what, take action, why, to address sustainable development needs, for whom, their community. What will be different in the world? Emerging leaders are now taking action in a supported and sustainable way. In regard to fulfilling our mission, this statement tells us that leaders are taking action supported by a network working towards collective impact, which reflects VIA's community-based approach to change. Remember the Google Earth and street navigation view. Even though impact sounds like a very big picture concept, it's really your theory of change results that should be big picture and conceptual. For your more detailed program model, an impact statement is more specific and must logically connect to your program activities and outcomes. Now, let's take a look at the second element, outcomes. Outcomes reflect the expected change in individuals as a result of participating in the program or change created by the program. There are generally two types of outcomes: learning outcomes and program outcomes. Learning outcomes describe what participants are expected to demonstrate, and program outcomes describe what a program is expected to accomplish. Outcomes can include changes in knowledge or awareness, skills or abilities, attitudes or motivations, and behaviors or actions. An example outcome statement from the accelerator is, all teams share knowledge with peers at least once within a year of completing the program. This is a change in behavior or actions taken as a result of participating in the accelerator. Outcomes are also often separated out over time. Immediate outcomes occur as a direct result of an activity or experience. Short-term outcomes are the desired change during or just after completing an activity or a certain experience. Mid-term outcomes are the desired change after completing a set of activities. And long-term outcomes are the desired change after all activities have been completed and more time has passed. You can decide what time frame is most useful for your team. Just try to think about what outcomes you need to reach in order to achieve your desired impact. Another way to think about it that I find really useful is KABC. K is a change in knowledge as a result of new information gained during or upon completing a program. A is a change in awareness or attitude as a result of the program. This happens after reflecting on new knowledge gained, and our attitude changes as a result. The difference between knowledge and awareness here is that knowledge refers to just gaining new information, whereas awareness is when we start to contextualize the new information or connect that information with other things we know or other perspectives we have, and our feelings or values associated with that knowledge changes. B is a change in behavior as a result of the change in awareness or attitude. And finally, C is the change in the community as a result of that changed behavior. Let's take a look at an example. Let's pretend your program focused on the negative environmental impacts of littering and working to change community behavior to reduce littering. An immediate desired outcome might be that the community knows more about littering as an issue. After they've had some time to reflect, their awareness or attitude towards littering may change because they start to care about the negative impacts to the environment and wildlife. A midterm outcome would be a change in the behavior as people start to reduce their littering due to an increased awareness and concern for the environment. The long-term outcome would be less litter in the natural environment, decreasing the environmental impact of trash. This is, of course, a very simple model, but it illustrates the sequence of change from knowledge to awareness to behavior to community. Previously, we looked at the portion of the model that corresponds to your theory of change results, which includes outcomes and impact. The reason we worked on those two sections first is because they inform the design of the other components. So now let's look at these three components: resources, activities, and outputs. Resources are what you need in order to successfully implement your activities. Activities are the actions that you take to implement your program. And outputs are the quantifiable products of your activities, or how the activity can be measured. Now let's take a closer look at each element. Resources are also referred to as inputs sometimes. Another way to think about resources is that they fuel your plan. This could include people or communities, including your team or anyone else helping you implement the program or providing support. Resources can also be the tools or technologies that you use, like Zoom. They could be partnerships or collaborations if you're working with other organizations. And they can also be supplies, space or building that you're using, and of course, money. All of these things can cost money though, so it's important to be as specific as possible about what exactly the money is providing. Activities are also referred to as interventions. It's helpful to think of your activities as verbs. They should describe the actions taken to implement your program. These aren't just the activities that participants experience, but also include the prep and follow-up work that you do. Some examples of activities could involve any recruitment or screening processes, orientation or onboarding of participants. All of the activities or events that occur during the program, including workshops, site visits, or student projects. And it could also include reflection and program evaluation activities. Outputs are the nouns for your activity verbs. They are the quantifiable product of your activities, or how your activities can be measured. For example, an output of recruitment activities could be the number of applications. For orientation, you could measure the completion rate of assignments. For program events, you could quantify the number of site visits. And for reflections and evaluations, you can quantify the completion rate as well. These are all just some examples. What kind of measurements you use will depend on your activities. Let's take a look at an example sequence from the accelerator. Here we're focusing on recruitment of teams. So some activities could include defining our selection process and criteria, advertising the program, reviewing applications, conducting discovery calls, and finally, selecting the teams. What would it take to do this? We of course need via staff, maybe via alumni who might be applicants or who can share the application announcement. We need grant funding to support the cost of these activities. And we have VIA's program methodology, which helps us define our selection criteria. The measurable outputs would include an application evaluation rubric that helps us decide which applicants to move forward in the selection process. We could set a target that 90% of the applications meet our basic criteria, and we could aim to have at least 5 interviews and 5 finalist teams selected. So how do we combine these 3 components? Remember that program models are often designed backwards, so we actually need to start where we left off, with our outcomes. In order to identify appropriate activities, you should think about the activities needed to achieve your outcomes. To identify necessary resources, think about the resources needed to implement this activity successfully. To define your outputs, think about how you could measure or quantify the output of that activity. The reason it's recommended to build a program model in this order is because it helps ensure that you are focusing on the right activities to achieve your intended results, that you are using your resources effectively, and that you have specific and measurable outputs for the actions taken. Often our instinct is to start by planning activities, but this process helps you slow down and really think about the effectiveness and efficiency of your plan. And if your plan doesn't lead you to your intended results, it's easier to go back and check your assumptions and make adjustments to your model. Basically, it helps you make smarter, more informed decisions as you improve your program design. As you are working on your resources, activities, and outputs, here's one way to check the logical flow of your model. The Kellogg Foundation's guide illustrates using if-then statements to read if your planned work logically connects to your intended results. Certain resources are needed to operate your program. If you have access to them, then you can use them to accomplish your planned activities. If you accomplish your planned activities, then you will hopefully deliver the amount of product and/or service that you intended. If you accomplish your planned activities to the extent you intended, then your participants will benefit in certain ways. If these benefits to participants are achieved, then certain changes in organizations, communities, or systems might be expected to occur. I recommend only using this once you have made a first draft of your model to check your work. You might find as you begin to plan your activities that you need to make your outcomes a bit more specific or make them a bit broader. This is entirely normal and part of the process. Don't be afraid to adjust other parts of your model as you work on new sections. Also remember to check your assumptions. You might discover new assumptions through this process as well. Let's talk a little bit about formatting. The format of your program model will depend on the program design framework you choose. VIA most often uses the Program Logic Model framework due to its flexibility. Here is an example of our initial draft of the Program Logic Model for the accelerator. We actually need to update it since we've already made changes to the program design. This was designed in Microsoft Word, and it's a common left-to-right format for a logic model. However, if you look at other program design framework examples, there are many other formats. Just like your theory of change, the design is up to you. Choose a framework and format that works best for your project. This is a pretty simple program logic model. For the outcomes, you can see that they have only two time frames labeled, intermediate outcomes and outcomes. But actually there are three columns which look more like short, mid, and long-term outcomes to me. Their impact statement is also fairly simple, just safe and healthy community. To me, this is more of a theory of change results statement, but this is the important thing to note about program models. There is not one right way to make them. The important thing is that they work for you and communicate your plan clearly. Let's focus for a minute on their outcome statement. You can see that they are sequenced and connected with arrows to show the relationship between them. Several outcomes may lead to a mid or a long-term outcome. This is definitely okay. In fact, it's common to see outcomes being combined over time to achieve your impact, especially using the program logic model framework. You can pause the video and take a minute to read through the model if you like. When you're ready, unpause and we'll move on to another example. This is a more traditional logic model layout, although their impact statement is not listed here. Let's focus on the outcomes. What's interesting to note in comparison to the previous model is that the relationships between the short, mid, and long-term outcomes aren't as clear. The boxes in each column kind of float around, so we don't know for sure if they are connected or not. Generally speaking, in order to make sure your model has a strong logic, the relationships need to be clear. Finally, regardless of what program design framework you choose, most of them are used to create program models with the same basic techniques as creating a theory of change, including backwards design to ensure that you are doing the right activities at the right time in the right way to achieve your results, iteration or the iterative process to gradually improve and refine your model to create a more detailed picture of what you are trying to accomplish, incorporating multiple perspectives to design an effective program for your participants or target users. This means using VIA staff, coordinators, and other participants to check your model. You also want to incorporate stakeholder perspectives throughout the process. Finally, program models are improved through testing. It's important to adjust or iterate on your model after getting new information through testing. Overall, the benefit of using these models is improved planning, design, and evaluation. They connect design to assessment directly, document and emphasize outcomes, especially learning outcomes, and help you catch gaps and blind spots. Program models provide a simplified visual display of complex ideas and processes, help develop shared language among stakeholders, and build credibility through reporting. Finally, program models are designed to be iterative, meaning they are flexible and intended for long-term use. There is no right or wrong model, just a model that improves and evolves. Enjoy exploring the many program design framework possibilities and developing your own program model.